Hello, welcome to the Cube Pod, episode 104. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante for our weekly pod. Dave, salute. Hold it up.
Johnny boy.
Dave, it's been 2 weeks of AI and data between Snowflake and Databricks. It's being called SnowBricks month.
SnowBricks.
Is the
Shout out to
buzzword.
Tony Bear.
SnowBricks. Love that term. Just sticks in your head. Great week. Big news today. Meta buys Scale AI for $14 billion. AI wave is full on, major shift, bubbled action. This is, again, continues to be the shift of all time. AI is just rocking the house. I mean, in all aspects, funding, got crypto IPOs, Circle went public. We missed last week's Cube Pod because we were so busy traveling. So, apologies for missing the week. Of course, our fans were going crazy on Twitter. We missed the pod. They're going nuts. Just so much action, Dave, just going on. You were at Snowflake.
John.
I was at AWS. Databricks week this week. I was in DC for the AWS DC Summit.
And I was at Cisco Live.
Cisco Live. Next week, we got the big week here in Palo Alto for the Robotics Summit. NYSE Wired and theCUBE partnership celebrating going into the second year of first birthday together. In partnering, with Brian Bauman, the founder of NYSE Wired, of which we had a drink yesterday in San Francisco, celebrating where the word "wired" was created by him. The Wired brand came out of the collaboration, and it's forming quite the trust network, driving a lot of engagement. Next week we get the face-to-face meetup party / pool at the Rosewood. Over 150 people signed up. 3 days of CUBE coverage. You're going to come from Philadelphia, from the AWS Reinforced Security Conference, back to Palo Alto. We're going to do, wall-to-wall coverage. We've got a great lineup. We have the CEO of the company that Databricks bought, Neon. He's coming on with ClickHouse and Neo4j. So we're going to have a really good conversation around, scalable databases, just all kinds of AI leaders coming in next week. And then we're heading back for crypto Trailblazers the week after in New York. Our team will be out at the Open Source Summit. A lot of action. Just continue. April, May, June. I've never seen the activity in the industry from an event standpoint on fire. I heard from an IBM executive today that London had Tech Week. The week before was New York Tech Week. Again, booming with AI coverage. Meta's buying Scale AI, which I interviewed last year. I just posted on Twitter. The CTO who came on theCUBE, they've been around for almost a decade, 9 years, and massive number, $14 billion. Meta's taken them off the table. Essentially pioneers making OpenAI successful. That was one of their big claims to fame. Scale AI, hugely successful company. I thought they were going to go public, but we're taken off the table. Data-centric AI is the story. AI and data, that is the flywheel of innovation. All aspects of the capital markets, all aspects of entrepreneurship, venture formation is happening around AI. All kinds of new entrepreneurs are coming on board, as well as massive private equity reshuffling and also jockeying for position. The IPO window opened up, as I mentioned. Circle went public. A crypto stablecoin company. They're going to open up another era. I'm going down to New York to figure that out. We'll do a whole week at the end of the month. But just a massive, massive news week. And then, of course, not without doom and gloom. Google was down yesterday. Google Cloud. OpenAI did a deal with Google Cloud, and then Google Cloud went down, right? So
yeah, you saw that OpenAI deal. I actually didn't see it in Rob's rundown. That was kind of interesting. I mean, I wasn't that surprised. Were you surprised by that? I'm not really.
No,
OpenAI's
remember
capacity
OpenAI was buying from Google, Oracle.
Their capacity, they're capacity constrained, and people are like, whoa, but Google's a big competitor, and I'm like, TK, he understands that all you got to do is look at Amazon, and look at choice and how that's worked out.
Yeah,
so the more choice,
Databricks Summit
the better.
Too. It's like, yeah, we have all this great age, but like you can get some GPUs too. It's like big gaps in the system. Without hardware, without the performance, they're not going to get anything. The rich are going to get richer, and the young small business is going to punch above their pay grade right out of the gate. I'm expecting a flurry of innovation from the upstarts and then the big whales.
But what's interesting about that Google OpenAI announcement is, from what I understand, it's TPUs. It's not access to necessarily NVIDIA GPUs. It's access to Google's tensor processing units. And I think that's really the first time that Google's made them available outside of Google. So that's kind of going to be an interesting test case.
I mean, if you look
scale.
at AWS, the innovation coming from Trainium and Inferentia, but basically Anthropic's success, and I think, Amazon squinting. I'm squinting through the messaging from the Amazon leaders. I was up there last week, talked to Matt Garman, the CEO, all the top leaders in the data center, all the different groups on the AI side, Bedrock, SageMaker. They all are kind of like, you can see them, they swallowed the canary, like they're like smiling. They're massively pivoting at scale. They know something, and my guess is, reading between the tea leaves there and taking the takeaway there, is that there's going to be significant cost efficiencies in running large scale reasoning. And if you're not integrating into the chip level, you are not going to have an edge. And that is another big deal. I think this deal with Google, you rightfully pointed out, two things jumped out at me right out of the gate. Hey, whoever's got the arms dealers sitting on the compute and capabilities, XPUs, are going to get business. So it's there. Google's open for business. Yeah, chuck some sales up. Yeah, get to see what the competitor's doing in a way, but also because they got Gemini. But why not, if you're OpenAI, take access to the TPUs and see if you can't, cut a deal with Google? Because in this game, it's good. No one remembers the fourth player, right? And the top three will win, and those top three will be AWS, Google, which is Alphabet, and then OpenAI, Microsoft maybe, but OpenAI's already got RFPs out for data centers in Texas for storage. They got data center opportunities to build on their own. Not sure Microsoft has the goods at Azure to compete with AWS. And I'm going to be really watching this in the second half leading up to reInvent to see if Microsoft has the experience at the systems level that AWS and Google have. Google and AWS by far are the best. And don't count out Meta. Meta just bought Scale AI. They are massive, large scale. So the question will be, of those four players, who falls off, Dave? Because no one remembers fourth place. I mean,
so I'm in a text chat with a couple of thought leaders, some authors and some thinkers, and one of them, somebody I've mentioned before, Dave Michela, threw out a bomb. Will AI be a commodity? Investor AI excitement is based on the history of key tech markets having category killers or winner take near all structures. But with so many major US and Chinese AI players, this may not be the case. Will AI become a highly competitive market, more like storage devices than Google search? Seems an interesting question to ponder. So of course I went right to NVIDIA. We're talking about AI like NVIDIA, and of course it was no, we're talking about LLMs up top. So I threw out something that was kind of interesting, I thought. I said, well, the mainframe era, there was one monopoly, IBM. It was a $250 billion TAM, IT TAM. The PC era were two monopolies, Win and Tel, and it was $1 trillion TAM. The internet, cloud, and mobile and social era, there was four monopolies, right? You had the big three plus Meta, big three hyperscalers. In the AI era, we might see 8 monopolies and a $16 trillion TAM, like a 4x TAM every wave. And so, I don't know, this comes back to what you and I talked about with Sarbjeet back in January 2023. Will OpenAI be able to maintain its first mover advantage? And Sarbjeet and I were really skeptical. You were like, nah, if they innovate, they will. And I actually think right now, if I had to make a call, I'd say you're more right than Sarbjeet and I. I think they could be the one to maintain that escape velocity, along with some others that might come out of the woodworks, and the big three hyperscalers plus Meta, maintaining there. So I think we could see 8 monopolies in this era.
Yeah, what's interesting about what you just said was, and when you gave the examples of the TAM and you mentioned the monopolies and the number went up, is if you look at the structural landscape of the business at that time, the landscape got bigger, right? Computing was a one monopoly market.
Exactly.
Hence the lower TAM. So if you take that forward, it makes sense because you have a bigger aperture for markets. So just the cloud one you just mentioned, and we know that we have the data on it, CUBE research. You mentioned cloud, mobile, social. Okay, those are 3 different markets. So if you break those down, you got a collection of monopolies in those. So if you kind of pull them together, which is I think the right way to look at it, because it's really kind of is cloud mobile social. It's Web 2.0 at scale with the cloud essentially, and then that's I think a good way to frame it because but the number went up. Now you add in AI, you got cloud, SaaS, which is basically agents coming behind that. You got infrastructure, computing, and then you got essentially new applications, agentic or business logic, low code, no code, vibe coding. Those things are multiple categories. So you'd say, okay, I would buy the argument there's 8 monopolies or more in there
Yeah,
because
and
it's
of course
bigger technically.
I don't mean to leave out Apple. Somebody might say, well, what about Apple? Well, you're right. I mean, Apple
Apples,
could
yeah, I
be
would
in
throw
there
them
as
in there
well.
too.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
adds to the argument, right?
Yep.
There's a bigger surface area. So,
Yep.
as we go mainstream, always love your expression. It depends how you slice the salami, right? So, you slice the salami and say, okay, let's just take AI and break that down. Then you'll have categorical monopoly. So that's why I think if you separate the commodity side of AI as a consumption layer, you're talking about models and foundational models, whether it's multimodal or just LLMs. That's going to get, I think, right along the lines as we predicted, what, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, the power law. That will be commoditized, and then you'll have long tail power law with a fat torso and thick neck, and you'll have a lot of players playing at the volume game, and then long tail smaller models, and then specialty models in the long tail. But it's all one thing. It's one market. I think that gets commoditized as connective tissue for the market. Now, the buzzword at Databricks this week was data as electricity. I always like to call it the bloodstream because it's got, it gives the metaphor a little bit differently, but it's the same thing. Electricity. Electricity is a commodity. Okay, so I think the data as electricity is a good metaphor because data feeds the AI and gives it life and energy. So bloodstream, electricity, that is it by itself, even though that's commoditized, doesn't mean it doesn't monopolize on the other end. So who monopolizes from electricity? The power companies. That's the cloud, right? So I think the cloud gets richer. The on-prem become kind of pockets of electricity because they have to power their own stuff. And then you're going to start to see a little bit more fragmentation. So I think the application layer will be 1,000 million flowers blooming because the democratization of computing generates now anyone could be a developer. I mean, the idea of a citizen developer, I was just talking with Paul Nishwati today, who ran the App Dev Done Right Summit with the CUBE research team. And we were talking about how, the developer wave is coming in even faster. So app dev as a cloud native world is going to turn into app dev as a developer world, which will include engineering, AI engineering, and low code, no code vibe coding. Vibe coding is essentially easy front ends, but you can't just integrate vibe coding into production. So what's going to happen is the engineering to enable vibe coding will happen. So that is going to be to me the big push from the data that I'm getting from the field. That clearly is happening. They're not mutually exclusive. Vibe coding, although so 2024, 2025 ushers in the era of AI engineering. This was the theme of Databricks. I thought that Jonathan Frankel, the chief scientist over there who built the agent brick and part of Mosaic Group, talked about it. And then, he was saying, don't discount the OLTP side of the business. So there's tons of transactions happening between agents. So, I'm very bullish on Databricks. I love what Snowflake has. I think that it's not about Snowflake versus Databricks because they both win massively, right? That's why I call it SnowBricks because they both have use cases. So
Well,
again, all
they're
of
on a
this is kind
collision
of
course. They're on a collision. I want to come back and talk about, but before we get off of will AI be commoditized? If we can go back to that for a second, thinking about the stack. So I don't think NVIDIA is going to get commoditized. I think they'll have competition, but I think they're going to maintain their lead for a while. I feel that way. And then the systems business is, servers. That's been a commodity for a while.
Mhm.
Storage, Michelle was saying storage is a commodity. Like NetApp is like one of the few independent storage companies left, NetApp and Pure. And Vast, the newcomers, like they don't even want to be called a storage company because it's commodity, right? And then as you go up the stack into data, cloud data warehouses, they could potentially get squeezed as the value and the control point move up the stack into the governance layer. You heard a lot about that this week. And then, what George and I have been talking about is this emerging system of intelligence layer. Everybody's going after that. The SaaS vendors, I do think Databricks and Snowflake are vying for control because that's going to be ultimately what serves agents. And so there's a system of agency layer as well that's going to be high value real estate. So, value, the non-commoditization is going up stack. Now in there, of course, throughout are LLMs. And I do think, many of the LLMs, to your point on the long tail, are going to be commodity. The question is, will one or maybe two emerge, maybe three, that have escape velocity and are not commodities and can get, quasi-monopoly like margins? I don't think it's going to be, three or four. It might be one or two. Maybe it's OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity or some other business model that comes out. And so you're definitely seeing a structural change in the IT stack and the IT industry, generally, as we see every time these new waves come along.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the web, right? I mean, a web page is commodity. A search engine has value, right? So I think the power law, to me, represents the bigger players will have larger capabilities, and to the extent that they can differentiate on that by providing services to the other LLMs. And if you look at Databricks, and Databricks had a guest speaker, Jamie Dimon, on stage, and he obviously was there probably for some deal they did and kicking them public or whatever. He actually was saying, "Hey, we will use small language models when you dig into some of the developments going on at the AGI house in San Francisco and what's going on in San Francisco and New York around the AI leaders who are building and coding. They're distilling off the Geminis of the world and Anthropic. So, what DeepSeek showed is you could distill and get highly efficient, smaller models out of the bigger models. So, I think there might be a moat potential or differentiation potential for the larger scale models to keep innovating while commoditizing the feature of AI, which is consumption. And then if you look at what Databricks is doing with their agent brick and some of the massive momentum around MCP, which is the model context protocol, the rise of the MCP and MCP nodes shows that what we talked about in the Cube, if you're listening to the Cube, we talk about models talking to each other. Model integration will be coordinated through a protocol, and all waves are enabled by protocol. So the MCP, I think, is a real strategic element of managing the intercommunications between models. So like if I have a small model, whether it's distilled or reinforced or trained through a distilled bigger model on-prem, it's my IP, that's one thing. Now, I might want to talk to a bigger model to interact for an agent, for instance. So, that harmonization or interaction requires to have more than like an API connection. So I think what APIs did for the cloud, this connective tissue between models will become very strategic in enabling value creation, but also value extraction. Because if you want to extract value out of the web, you got to have agents that do work. So, I think the commodity thing is not black and white. It's situational. I would argue that OpenAI could get differentiated, but certainly it's going to be at the top of the power law. So around it, you see Gemini, Anthropic. Those are the big three. Now, in the open source side with Meta, that is not as a good model, and X has got a model coming. So, okay, they could play in the power law, but they'll have to differentiate. So, what's their strategy? Again, they're going to probably think about, okay, how do I enable faster model adoption? And that's why I was intrigued by the Mary Meeker report she put out, because she hasn't put one out in a while, but she was seminal in moments when she did it with the web. And she measured online population, which is the adoption of the web via users surfing and clicking and browsing. Okay, and they had a browser called Netscape, and then Microsoft with monopoly power took it over. So, okay, so what's the equivalent of a search engine? So if the commodity is a web page, I would say a web page is as commodity as it gets. Anyone can put it up. It's democratized. I can hang a shingle out there, put a web page, sell some stuff, offer some browsing, HTML, HTTP. Those protocols enabled that. The markup language allowed for formatting. You're off to the races. But it was the search engines that allow people to find what they're looking for. So I think search is a great way to look at where AI is going to go on the consumption side. In that case, it's commodity and differentiation.
I think you're right about, your point about MCP and model or agent protocols. You have MCP, which seems to be getting a lot of traction. It's stateless, and I think the use case right now is predominantly, and I think you heard this last week at Databricks, is agents talking to tools. Then you have A to A from Google, which is stateful. And that's, to me, more about agents talking to agents, multiple agents. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds. But to your point, TCP, old reliable TCP, TCP/IP enabled the internet to get built. And so that was a breakthrough moment. So
And
Databricks.
if you look at all the top scientists like Jonathan Frankel at Databricks, and Snowflake has folks on there too, the groups, the number one discussion is about AI engineering. Just like building software, he mentions there was a way to do it, and you build a design of it and you write the code. It's very objective. AI is not objective. AI is subjective. The humans may interpret a prompt differently. The computers may interpret the prompt differently. So reliability is the number one thing that's on the table right now in the market. So if you look at why Meta bought Scale AI, and I just posted this on Twitter, is they've effectively created a trust mechanism to effectively evaluate models. So you look at what Databricks is putting out there and what the top scientists are putting out there is that evaluating the model allows you to use reinforced learning with human input at scale. So you can use agents to simulate and learn human behavior with mathematics, then apply that to the agent setup time and basically train it. It's like on-the-job training. And then there's kind of an HR function involved in the system where it's like, you got to evaluate it. Did you do good on the job today? And that's the core problem that you're seeing today. Is no one really understands, is my agent hallucinating? Is my agent doing things that I want it to do? Is it going to give away free product? Is it going to give a security breach, privacy problems? These are concerns that are legit. And so we're in the era of reliable AI. So I think you're going to see move quickly to, as reinforced learning, as the systems can support more tokens, more algorithms around reliability, trust, and effectiveness. So to me, that's engineering. You can't just do vibe coding and saying, hey, look at this, I just built this with AI. Now try to integrate that into production if you're an enterprise, or try to make it a good service for a consumer. Now we're talking, it's a little bit different. And that's basically what Andy Jassy told us when we interviewed him. Remember, Dave, when we sat down with Andy Jassy at reInvent, he kind of said agents are hard. And what he was getting at is that, yeah, I can do a demo, but try to scale that.
Well, all this, so, Snowflake buys Crunchy, Databricks buys Neon. Those are, and it was interesting to listen to Ali talk about, when I was back in Berkeley, we dug into the, R papers and, but IBM, everything that 90% of today's databases are in that paper, et cetera, et cetera. But both companies are now trying to get into transactions. Remember Unistore, Snowflake announced Unistore, I don't know, several years, not 2022, I want to say, and they never really could ship it because it's so hard. And so we're trying to sort of integrate the two. And so now if I understand what Databricks has done with Lakebase, it's basically, it's Neon, and they're not, I mean, it's integrated, but it's not, right? I mean, it's separate. They're not trying to smash transactions and OLAP together. But to the point, it's really, really hard. But the importance of it is, like today, the applications, at least that I saw, both at Snowflake and last week at Databricks, they were largely kind of knowledge base applications, where the holy grail is actually taking action on transaction systems. So if I own the semantic layer and I have the governance layer, I can then, and I have access to the business process and the business process logic, I can then push actions out to Salesforce or SAP or whatever, application du jour I'm running, and that, as opposed to being a historical system of analytics. And that's what, Snowflake has, historically been, the data warehouse. But now we're talking about actually taking action and systems of agency. And that is really, really hard. But I have to say, I was pretty impressed. I mean, I was impressed with Snowflake's Summit. It was great. theCUBE was there. Got some awesome guests. Databricks was really good too. I mean, Ali Ghodsi was, I thought he killed it. I thought his two keynotes, and then Matei, oh my God, Matei's been like on fire on Twitter. He said, my favorite part of Ali Ghodsi's keynotes, we're announcing a new data warehouse that's 29% faster, but 35% more expensive. No, wait, That was the other conference last week. We're just making DB SQL 25% faster. Of course, he's saying just kidding. He's shitting all over Snowflake. They had some performance benchmarks which showed only 29% performance. Of course, Snowflake is touting 2x at least better performance. And yeah, it's 30 to 35% higher price. So I think most customers are going to see with Gen 2 and Snowflake much, much better performance than 29%. Although I did talk to Jeremy Burton, who's CEO of Observe, and he confirms that Observe is definitely seeing early benefits from Gen 2. And don't forget, they're the largest, Observe is the largest, they're an observability company built on Snowflake. They're the largest Snowflake ISV in terms of query volume because they're hitting it all the time. And he's confirmed both performance and TCO are improved with Gen 2. I don't have hard numbers yet, but also Observe is a typical example. Most customers are going to see better results than Observe because they'd be running queries with shorter compile times and more execution in bigger warehouses. So savings and performances should be greater. But in typical Databricks fashion, they're having a field day with benchmarks.
Yeah, I would just want to make a note. I said that Meta is buying Scale AI for investing
No,
14 billion.
But essentially, they're getting Alex Wang to go, be on board. Essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean,
15 billion gets you Alex Wang.
Yeah, it's not. It's maybe I jumped the gun. It's basically an acquisition, but it's an investment at a $29 billion valuation. And again, to your point about these companies, just the money, Dave, is going crazy. OpenAI said they're doing about 10 billion in recurring revenue. Glean, a company we've been featuring on theCUBE, just raised 150 million at $7 billion plus valuation. Tons of other investments. A lot of these rounds are like in the 30 million to $50 million rounds. These are startups. So startups are getting seed to Series A funding in the 30 to 60 million range. Just ton of that. And then meanwhile, the big companies like Cisco Live, they're pulling up product blitz aimed to be more AI friendly. The DC Summit, I interviewed exclusive interviews with the folks that run all the data center business. They announced $30 billion in commitments in North Carolina, 10 billion, and then 20 billion in Pennsylvania, all around other sources of energy. So AWS deploying CapEx, okay, 30 billion, more and more action. Public sector is getting more democratized. So the whole Doge thing is actually fueling AI inside the public sector. So one little caveat I haven't shared with you yet is that at the DC Public Sector Summit, the backdrop of Doge was, yeah, government's inefficient and not productive. Well, guess what? Salesforce is doing great there. And even Elon Musk called it out when he was running Doge. So we interviewed Salesforce head of public sector. She talked about how AI is actually riding the tailwind of Doge. Now, that's kind of not obvious, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Does make sense. Totally makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of concern about ServiceNow and ServiceNow licenses being unused. But I mean, the fact is, if you bring in these modern platforms, like ServiceNow, and I would argue with Agentforce, you're going to see, significant productivity. That to me is, like you said, Doge should be a tailwind for companies like those. So, it remains to be seen how successful Doge is. It was, everybody wants better, more efficient government, but we all know that the big nuts in the budget are Social Security and Medicare, and obviously the interest, the debt service. Those are the big three, and of course defense. So go after the big problems: Social Security, Medicare, restructure that. Get more efficient in the Defense Department. It'll lower your expenses. You'll get better credit ratings. You'll lower your interest rates. You'll lower the debt service. I mean, just if they don't do that, then nothing's really going to happen. You're not going to Doge your way to a balanced budget. It's just not really possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be fun. Well, next week we have a huge event, SiliconANGLE and theCUBE with NYSE Wired. It's our reunion, second annual Silicon Valley AI Leaders Infrastructure event. We're calling it Robotics and Leaders because robotics is hot, and we got a lot of people coming from large scale data centers. We're going to have folks from Humane, NVIDIA, AMD, Cerebras. Like I said, we got VCs, Eileen Lee, a bunch of folks. Lambda's coming on. Looks like they're going to go public, in my opinion. I think they're kicking ass. The GPU cloud, a bunch of hot startups. Like I said, Neon, ClickHouse, Neo4j, Augment is coming on. Roboto AI, Bright Machines. Um, a lot of robotics folks. What else is here? Diane Bryant's coming on, by the way. She's on the board
Yeah,
of
I saw
Broadcom, so
that.
she's a celebrity. So she's independent director at Broadcom, former Intel executive. Love to get her perspective. She's got a unique perspective on some of these big players making a land grab. VJ's coming on from Broadcom. He's runs the wireless division at Broadcom. Broadcom and VMware are kicking ass right now. If you look at the numbers, their earnings, I think that we're going to get a big surprise with VMware. I think VMware is doing much better than people think. My reading the tea leaves is that Hock Tan's moves have made so much money on the VMware side, it's a cash. You always said VMware's a cash cow, right? VMware is just the gift that keeps on giving. And I think with Hock Tan at the helm, it's like double prices, lower costs, margins are up on the chip side. If you're Hock 10, it's almost like a problem now. It's like his gross margins are too high, Dave. He's gonna have to go to Wall Street.
Yeah,
Like, whoa, I gotta water
I
this down.
know.
How do I sandbag them? I
Well,
got,
it's interesting.
you can push 90% gross margins as a company.
Well, but there's the thing, software gross margins are, usually used to be at the, high 80s, low 90s, moving toward 100. Today, SaaS gross margins are in the 70s. Why? Because you got to pay the COGS of the cloud vendors. It's the Sarah Wang and Martin Casado $1 trillion paradox. And so Hock Tan doesn't have that problem.
He
His
doesn't have that
marginal
problem. You know
cost.
why he doesn't have that problem? Because the enterprises who do on-prem pay for their own stuff.
Right, exactly. And so he doesn't have to bundle in the hardware cost. He doesn't have to pay Amazon or Google or Microsoft for those COGS. And so he's got a really good business model as long as the stuff basically stays on-prem or slash hybrid. So, I mean, I was talking to NetApp in the bar at Cisco Live, and they were saying, look, we are definitely getting a lot of demand from VMware customers that are like, help us. And he said, these guys were telling me, look, we're not trashing VMware. We're saying, hey, if you want help with VMware, we can help. We've got a great VMware solution now. They're opening up a little bit to the ecosystem, and NetApp's got a great product. Oh, but if you want to go to Red Hat, we're here to help as well. So, and of course, you definitely see Nutanix out there as well. And so the point I've always made, John, is that Hock Tan wants the tip of the pyramid. He wants those, high margin businesses. He doesn't want the other stuff. He doesn't care if the ecosystem takes that away. And frankly, here's what's going to happen. If you migrate off your workloads off of VMware and you maintain some of your work on VMware, you're just going to get the price raised. So he's like, look, use VCF, use the full stack, get value out of it. You're going to pay for it anyway, so you might as well use it. And that's how Broadcom's approaching it. And it's like, just pay the tax, learn how to use it, siphon off those crap applications to other places, and just move on.
We have Vast Data coming to the event. We got I think G2 is coming.
Huge. No, is he coming?
I think he's coming.
I think we invited him.
Patel, the new president of Cisco, friend of
So I saw him this week. Cisco Live was good. I will tell you, Cisco Live two years ago, I did a piece. I actually started to write a piece. I was invited to this strategy session on Cisco Live, on Cisco's AI strategy. And I thought, I'll write it up, just put another post out. Started to write up. I was like, I can't even get my head around it. The strategy was so convoluted. So I went into the CUBE research WordPress backend and looked at it. I pulled it up. I was like, this thing is a mess. And I basically stopped writing it. I put it to the side. I said, I'll finish later. I never finished it. Well, what they showed was a really coherent, cogent, unified Cisco AI strategy, which I was really pleased to see. I think G2 Patel, really has got that company going from a product standpoint. they're basically making the argument that you can't have great AI without low latency networks, and there's some real, merit to that. And so Cisco's really thought about it. They also had, I love this chart that they put up. I put a post out on theCUBE Research. They had this chart that showed the way that, typical LLMs with chatbots, the network demand, it's very spiky. And then they showed with reasoning what the network demand was, and it's not spiky, it's just high across. And so, Cisco was making, I think, a really strong case that you're going to need ultra low latency networks. So you think about, well, what about Arista? So to the point earlier about a commoditization, they were making the point that, look, we have custom silicon. Now, Hock Tan would say, why are you doing your own custom silicon? Just buy from a merchant silicon player, which is most networking companies do. Cisco's making the case, and I've talked to Martin Lund, who was a former, he basically used to run the networking group at Broadcom. This is kind of even before Hock. What you see today from things like Tomahawk are things that he started years ago, at least the claims he did, and I believe him. The guy was pretty solid. He was showing me their ASIC. The point is, if you don't have that programmable ASIC, they were fearful that they were going to get commoditized. Now, I think Arista's got strategies, Juniper's got their Mist strategy, and they've got, their moats. But Cisco's moat, in part, is with that programmable ASIC, and they're saying it'll get us to market faster. We can do new generations without having to go to tape out. And then the other thing they're doing is they're slamming together the network and security, bringing Splunk in. They're doing free ingest for Splunk. They've refreshed their entire switch portfolio and their whole networking portfolio, campus, data center, everything to be AI optimized. So I was pretty impressed with, the SKU list that they came up with, and putting security in the fabric. So now it's just about proving it. So my piece was called A New Cisco for the Agentic AI Era, and they're really trying to support agents, ambition, innovation, and the burden of proof. So, okay, so they've come up with a lot of innovation. They've released a lot of new products. Now they got to prove that they can keep pace. And their other big challenge, I think, John, is going to be, they're moving to I'm going to steal your point. They're moving at the speed of NVIDIA because you have to, but the customer moves at the speed of the CIO. So they got to make sure that their sales force, and they're good sellers, they got 20,000 sellers, they're Cisco, they know how to sell, but they got to make sure that their sellers know how to absorb these new innovations so they're not just shoving them down customers' throats, so that they're actually delivering value, and that value is sustainable. That's the proof point that we want to see now from Cisco. But I was really impressed. It was a good showing, and I think Cisco can now show some organic growth. That's what I really want to see out of Cisco, is at least mid to high single-digit organic growth. No more of this flat organic growth or down organic growth and growth through acquisition. Let's show some organic growth, and that's what I think G2 is basically promising with the product innovation that he's delivering.
So I just got an email from Brian Bauman saying that G2 is coming on with Renin. So from Vast Data.
Really?
Vast
Awesome.
Data. Well, they had that big announcement, right? So that was a huge announcement for Cisco. The storage, networking, compute, which we've been following since 15 years of doing theCUBE and SiliconANGLE and theCUBE Research. If you add database in there, that's now the fourth pillar, right? So you got those four areas are the new converged infrastructure, for lack of a better word, around where the action is. So networking, data, all that's going to come in for security. So I'm really looking forward to that interview. And again, the Silicon Valley second annual, we have 150, so I just checked the Luma, 157 sign up for the 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock reception party at the Rosewood on Wednesday the 18th is packed. Biggest names in the business are coming. It's phenomenal.
So I make you laugh. So, how frugal Vast is. So I was texting Jeff Denworth, hey, are you here? Cisco Live? He goes, no, I'm out there. Renin's there. Go find him. So I went to find him in the exhibit hall. And I'm walking up and down. Look, I see all the booths. I see, the hyperscalers. I see, NetApp's got a big booth. Everybody's there, right? I can't find the Vast booth. Turns out, no Vast booth, right? They're just doing briefings in their suite or wherever they were, just doing meetings. No Vast booth.
I can't wait to talk to Jeff next time I see him. I want to find out what their enterprise strategy is, because I think, their opportunity clearly is in the enterprise. They've had a great run after we launched them a few years ago here in theCUBE in our studio. They'd have great business results on the hyperscalers. So, from a business perspective, I think the question mark on Vast is, can they win the legacy enterprises who are transforming as we speak? And it's not as easy as just throwing more gear at it, right? So you have to have the data platform. Signs that Glean's getting a $7 billion valuation shows that the enterprises are still in search mode, RAG and retrieval augmentation generation. So I think the enterprises are slowly maturing to be ready for a vast Cisco or new kind of infrastructure. So we'll see. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, they got partnerships with Cisco, HPE, Dell even, and I'll tell you this, and you know this because we've been spending time in New York and talking to a lot of banks. They're all building their own on-prem AI stack, and Vast is absolutely the #1 distributed file system that they're bringing in. Yes, there's Weka. Yes, there's DDN. Yes, you got some Hammer space, but Vast, everybody's testing Vast to build that on-prem, AI stack, building out their center of excellence, and people seem to really like the product.
AI is the gift that keeps giving, Dave. I mean, we were talking about VMware on the software side, VMware on the chip side, or Broadcom on the chip side. Both win with AI, because look at the lucky strike VMware got with that. And AI is only going to give them more confidence that, hey, stop worrying about pricing, get enabled for AI. And I think that's why I love Databricks, why I love Snowflake, and I love AWS S3 tables, because I think the storage piece combined with the data layer will be a massive, massive value creator. And the extraction from that will be agents. I mean, the fact that you can have metadata now, so low latency, addressable low latency metadata, will make storage even more popular. And I did a great interview with Mylan, who used to run S3, now she runs all the data parts of AWS. She was kind of hinting and smiling like, wait until New York, waiting for reInvent. I mean, I think there's going to be some big moves from AWS on S3 and how they're handling their data. They're already crushing Q for developer, Q for business, QuickSight. These services are great, and the Bedrock story actually is working for AWS. We got SageMaker, was just kind of the under the hood kind of console for the hardcore data engineers. But if you're a developer, you just go to Bedrock, boom, integration done, tooling no problem. So I think this world of ease of use will be huge. Reliability will be huge. And again, hearing from these infrastructure leaders in Silicon Valley will help us squint through the hype, because everyone's kind of waiting on the on deck circle right now for the infrastructure to deliver the kind of payloads that these workloads are going to need in the tokens, in throughput, in cost, and efficiency. Once that starts hitting the market, it's going to be unbelievable. I think last time on the pod we called it the red zones, like in football. NFL channel, they show you all the red zone action. There's more red zone action right now in terms of ready to punch in the end zone for wins in AI. And I think you're seeing the frothy capital markets booming and the new IPO window opening up from crypto to a lot of these companies. We'll be interviewing them next week at the Rosewood, the NYC Wire, and theCUBE event. That's going to be massive because they're all going to go public. These are the companies that are going to go public. So you're going to see, I mean, these are real businesses. They're not like, throwing haymakers out there saying, faking it till you make it. You can't fake it till you make it in AI. You either got to deliver the revenue and be integrated in enterprise scale, or you're out. And there's no way you can head fake the market right now. If you don't have the customers and you don't have the CapEx and potential customers, it's very interesting time, Dave.
I'll tell you, I'll come back to your S3 thoughts. Again, I heard this big time last week at Databricks is put it in cheap storage, put it in object storage in AWS or Google or Microsoft, and all the value is going to rise up on top of that. And I think the trend is very clear. Value just keeps migrating up. We separated compute from storage. Yes, and then I gotta give Databricks credit. They really pushed this. Ali's, you saw his keynote. He put up all the naysayers a couple of years ago with, all the problems with open table formats, And one of them was Bill Inman, the father of the data warehouse. And then he showed today, even the father of the data warehouse, even, of course, Snowflake, leaning in, et cetera. Although Snowflake announced it back in 2022, so I'm not sure where they were.
I mean, data warehouses
but maybe they did reluctantly.
Is going to hang around if the companies are too scared to burn the boats or go all in on the cloud. But I think or all in on a data layer like a Databricks or a Snowflake.
Well, I'll say this.
Hang around for a while.
I'll say this, John. Ali's basic, point was, you're going to get locked in. You're going to get locked in. They're going to raise prices on you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In my experience, if with most executives, if they get value, if they can get more value out of a platform than they can by doing it themselves with open source, I would say 85% will go with the value play. And damn the lock-in torpedoes, they'll risk that.
Yeah.
Now,
well, I mean, look at Dave. Look, we said this in theCUBE. Lock-in changes in this new era. It's scale, and value creation, value extraction. So I would argue that
LLMs and conversational AI, they change the complexity equation there, right? They make open source potentially easier. But the point I want to make earlier was SnowBricks is on a collision course. Databricks and Snowflake, they're going after that same semantic layer, and they're just getting there with different paths. And it's really fascinating to see.
Well, you had
Databricks
was the number 2 player. They came in behind Snowflake. Snowflake had the first run at it and got all the best customers. So their roster is A+. Databricks has got a roster developing super fast. They're doing agents better, in my opinion, from what I can see. We'll see how that plays out. Now, the thing to me about Databricks, and if you go back and look last year, and we covered this on theCUBE in great detail, CUBE Research nailed it as well. When they burn the boats and burn the village on the debates, when Iceberg became the table format, they bought Tabular, remember?
Yes,
the iceberg impact has been phenomenal.
Big news.
And customers that I talk to, both Snowflake and Databricks, the SnowBricks customers, the general reaction is, look, we want to make it easier. And the people who are busy were dealing with massive transactions. They didn't have time to worry about moving data around. They just wanted to store their data where it was, use Unity, and have the open table formats, whether it's Delta or Iceberg. Now we're getting in the weeds a little bit, but Unity is their catalog. With Iceberg support, read, write, Iceberg support, it literally is a no-brainer for a customer to put it in Iceberg format. Store everything in Iceberg, you're set. Now you're kind of not locked in, but kind of locked in.
You're kind of locked in still. You're kind of locked in. Databricks has its moat, but they made the point that you got to sync permissions between Horizon, which is Snowflake's proprietary governance catalog, and Polaris, which is its open source catalog. But what Snowflake's doing, John, is they're slowly trickling Horizon function into Polaris. So they're doing a little balancing act.
Yeah, but you're assuming the SnowBricks customers is not market. I would even argue, I would agree.
Wait, say it again. Assuming what?
You're assuming that the SnowBricks, the joint customers, they get to do that syncing. But if you want an end-to-end data platform that takes the storage equation out of it, store anywhere, and reduce the data movement, you can go with Databricks today with Unity and get everything. If you're a SnowBricks customer, hybrid between Snowflake and Databricks, you then could choose to sync up or just go all in on Databricks. So I think Databricks is throwing down the gauntlet, and that's going to be the question. How much overlap will they have? And if I was a research analyst, which I'm not, I'm more of I don't really dig into this piece, but I would.
Pretty good analyst. You're a pretty good analyst.
If I had time to research this in detail, I'll look at it from a reporting standpoint, but I'd be curious to know what the overlap is between Databricks and Snowflake over the past 3 years and the trend line.
Oh, I got that data with my ETR buddies.
Is it getting bigger, or is it getting smaller?
It's accelerating. It's actually getting bigger. You're talking
Databricks
about
is taking more of Snowflake's business.
The overlap is between 30 and 40%. In other words, 30 to 40%. If you look at Snowflake customers inside of Databricks, it's about 35%, and Databricks customers inside of Snowflake, it's about 35%. You look at the reverse, it's about 40%. So it's called between 35 and 40% customer overlap, account overlap. So what you basically have is the hardcore technical people that love to mess with, Spark, have a greater affinity for Databricks. And I talk to customers at Snowflake, and I ask them, are you running on AWS or Azure? And they're like, I think it's AWS. It's just Snowflake. I never touch.
I don't even know.
I never touch AWS primitives. I don't want to go anywhere near them. And so they're all about the simplicity. Now, what's going to be really interesting to see, because you saw this with conversational AI and all the sort of data intelligence stuff that Databricks announced last week. They're dramatically simplifying the user experience and the user interaction from BI to low code throughout the stack. And so that's where the complexity of Databricks stack historically potentially appeals to some new markets. At the same time, Snowflake is bringing its simplicity mantra into AI. So that's why I say they are totally on a collision course. But the market's big. It's definitely not a one winner takes all, because they've both got a big customer base. And I would say there were probably throughout the week 20,000 people at Snowflake, if you include their Thursday developer conference. And I think Databricks was what, 22,000, kind of all at once. So a little bit bigger.
All right. Well, Dave, we got a big week next week. I thought I'd have some time off after the Databricks event, but back in the studio here in Palo Alto. Next week's going to be a marathon.
It's going to be great.
And then I'm going to New York for the Crypto Trailblazers. Brian and I are going to start doing a lot more.
When are you going there?
The last week of the month, 23rd.
Well, I was going to come down and see you.
So we're 24th and 25th. We're doing 2 days there. So,
but do we have a team, production team? Aren't they in
I'm going to have
OSS?
a team lined up. We got also
Aren't they going to Open Source Summit?
I'm not going to Open Source Summit, no.
No, but I think the team is going to be there.
We got to get. I put it.
All right, good. Then I'm going to come down then.
Well, Tuesday and Wednesday are the 2 days, but also the permissionless conference is going on. So again, crypto IPOs are coming. NYSE seems to be the place where they're going. Kind of reminds me of the early days of the NASDAQ when everyone would go there because that's where tech companies went.
Well,
tech companies are going to NYSE, and the cryptos are like the new wave.
I was reading in my dead trees that a lot more companies are doing what Michael Saylor's doing. They're putting crypto on their balance sheet, and the Wall Street Journal's freaking out about it. The Wall Street Journal's it's like the anti-Trump publication now. Every day they have a negative article about. It's not like direct. Like negative, like you get on, MSNBC, but it's like these opaque, sort of, questioning things like crypto and the dangers of crypto. It's like a backhanded way of attacking Trump.
It's like a family member slapping on his family member. Hey guys, but the New York Times, they don't pull any punches either. And then
No, this is a journal though. This is a journal, right?
Yeah, so tell me what's going on. What happened yesterday? Read some of yesterday's news to me.
Well, I got Wednesday here.
Okay.
There's something going on in California. You hear about that?
Yeah. Stage protests. Yeah.
Crazy.
Dave,
crazy.
We'll see you next week. Looking forward to seeing you popping out of the Reinforce from AWS.
Yeah, I've never missed a Reinforce. I bet you I'm probably the only person other than the Amazonians who've been to every single one of them. So yeah, it's going to be in Philly again. Looking forward to that.
Good luck. Yeah.
They're really opening it up this year. There's way more analysts going. Usually it's a small, hardcore group of security analysts. This year, I've talked to a number of analysts that are going. AWS has put the full court press on to get more analysts there.
Well, I had a nice dance card in Seattle last week. I had Matt Garman. We had all the Mylana tool who runs Bedrock.
He's awesome.
A bunch of their leaders, 10 interviews. We are doing an AWS halftime report. AWS leaders and ecosystem leaders, Cohesity, Nutanix, probably gonna have either CrowdStrike or Palo Alto, maybe IBM, and we're gonna do a handful of these leaders and do a digital version of a halftime report because so much has happened. We've got the film, we got the videos, they look great. I released one video. Prasad, who runs all the data center, I'd get that out. I want to get that out for DC Summit because of the news. So I kind of pre-released the interview. We interviewed his team. They handle all the big data center region deployments. So we went really in the weeds on 50 minutes of what's inside the data center. Data center's a computer, how Amazon's using air cooling, how they're reusing water, how they're looking at carbon footprint. I mean, everything around these $20 billion data centers is so impressive. So really good content there.
I
We're going to
am.
stream that out on July 9th.
I met with some of the same guys doing the real estate and the data center, expansion from Cisco. And one of the things they were doing, they're going harder after Africa. And I was like, geez, I remember like way back 12, 15 years ago, IBM going hard after Africa. And what about Microsoft? They made a similar attempt to go after Africa. Did you study that? And he goes, oh yeah. And what he told me was, just a quick aside, he said, what was happening is what they would make these deals with the senior level people. And then they would start putting money in, and then the warlords would skim like $100 million and then get the hell out of the region, and they're living in wherever, Dubai, and then the whole thing would collapse. So what Cisco's strategy is to just really go bottoms up and try to build out. So, I mean, Africa's has been historically tough, but obviously South Africa's got some infrastructure that could be potentially built upon. But yeah, I mean, we're still in that data center super cycle, John. I love that word. I love that phrase.
All right, we'll see you next week then, and we're going to wrap up Friday here
All
at
right.
the CUBE Pod. 104 is in the books. SnowBricks, Meta investing 14 billion in a startup that's 9 years old, and just money's flowing everywhere. Innovation's popping. Dave, we'll see you next time. Thanks for
All right.
listening,
See you
everyone.
guys. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.